I spot you right away at the iron gate's hands in the wrong pockets. Eyes taking inventory like you're about to be quizzed on before you can introduce yourself, I say. You're the new night watch, yeah? And your laugh comes out like a hiccup you meant to swallow. I don't make you repeat your name because names matter here in ways you won't like yet. So I offer mine, Ambrose, caretaker, 5 years, nights, keys. I didn't plan on any of this. I was supposed to wear a white coat, keep a pen in my breast pocket, and a schedule stacked with rounds and charts. Parents with soft hands and hard hopes pushed me toward exams whose names sounded like locks clicking. And I kept walking because that's what you do when people you love skimp on vacations to buy you prep books. Then one wrong turnout passed. Pine holophone signal limp. Map app sulking and. The fog opened like a curtain, and there were these gates. Black iron with leaves worked into the bars, and the word Hallow's edge curled across the top like it had grown that way. The bell rang 13 times on a day with no wind, and I felt the count in my teeth. I asked if they needed help. They said nights like a warning and a welcome. Nights turned into learning which key sticks in which rust, which you branches. Try to hold your sleeve which family vaults hum if you brush them too fast, and how the ground itself will sometimes rise under your boots like a sleeping thing turning over. Everyone in town has a story about this place, the old money, the old soldiers, the old grudges, but what they don't say out loud is the part that keeps me, the elders who came here when they ran out of places to hide, the ones who lived long enough to retire from scaring and now need a quiet corner and a handful of rules to keep their edges tucked in. Call them monsters if it helps you hold them at arm's length. Learn to call them by their habits. First lesson is simple. The cemetery is bigger inside the fence than out. You'll see a map in the cottage, neat as a hymn and just as honest. It redraws itself when you aren't looking. Your boots will learn the true paths before your eyes. Due North Lawn. Soldiers, straight rows, names that sound like coins when you say them. West Wall, belladonna beds, and the mortar that sweats in August. South Slope, family vaults, Coleman, Vireo, usher doors that look like they were shut forever by people who love the word forever. East beyond the chapel, Popper's Ground, and a hill with a hollow root that pretends to be a fox den. I'll show you the path lights and the pump that rattles once before it's honest. It's a bone dry. Well, that isn't. The caretaker's. Kettle that lives on the back left burner and never boils faster just because you glare at it. But understand this before I hand you a key. This place runs on rules, and the rules are not superstition or ceremony. They're plumbing. Follow them and you get to sunrise with the same number of bones you started with. Break them and you'll learn why I oil the gate hinges whether anyone's watching or not. You're already thinking I'm teasing, that I'll grin and admit it's all a hazing story. I'm not. I'll give you one soft rule tonight and a handful more when your feet know where to stand. Soft rule. If the bell rings 13, face the gate and count backward from 7 in a language your mouth doesn't use for cursing. If you don't have one, numbers will do, said like an apology. Then speak a name that isn't yours and never has been. You'll pick one by accident soon. Keep it. The bell is older than the chapel and it keeps its own moods. Some of them open. Doors, you'll hear a cough through the chapel vents at some point. That sounds like gravel in paper. Don't panic. Gavril lives in the bone spaces and pride keeps him in the dark. He doesn't bite. He asks for lozenges that taste like honest medicine and funeral shoes. You'll want to trim the U's before midnight because the list in your pocket is already making you sweat. Don't. The wolves on the east terraces hate the snap of fresh cut you. It lands in their nerves like hail. They sing themselves still around too. After that you can work, but wrap the shears with cloth and oil the blades with the green bottle. Not the blue scratches. We keep maple bacon crullers in a tin for Mr. Rendell, who walks with a fork in his boot and remembers Warzy. Never names. If he approaches while you're learning timing, place one by the Coleman angel and step back without talking. You're frowning now, the way I did my first week trying to file everything into reel and story. Stop that. Filing gets you hurt. Watching gets you home. It's 9:30, which means the path lights will blink a half second before an owl passes and the south slope fog will pull itself up like a shawl. Come on, the kettle's done pretending. We'll mark your knot name on the inside of your wrist in pencil so you don't hand the bell the wrong answer. I'll show you the keys and the locks they like. It's the trick of opening the cottage door without waking the map, and the corner where we keep the green oil. Don't be brave here. Be exact. It's how you say please and thank you in a language. The ground understands. I keep the map in the cottage because the cottage is the only room stubborn enough to make the cemetery pretend it isn't moving. And I spread it across the table like a tablecloth you shouldn't spill on, even though the map stains itself whenever it learns a new path. You lean in, hungry to fix the grounds inside your head. And I tell you the truth fast, so you don't waste weeks wrestling with it. Hallow's edge is bigger inside the fence than out. And the paths are more honest to boots than to eyes. North. Lawn, soldiers, white stones in disciplined rows. Each name a coin that never quite stops ringing when you say it. West wall, the belladonna beds, and a seam of green tile the witches laid down when the old boards kept catching fire from prayers. Nobody said out loud. South slope. The family vaults Coleman, Vireo. Sure heavy doors pretending they were shut forever by people who loved the word forever. If a lid hums under your hand, that's not a greeting. It's a reminder to take your hand back. Right. Beyond the chapel, pauper's ground. The hill with the hollow root that pretends to be a fox den, and a wind that doesn't match the trees. The map redraws itself while you're pouring coffee. Don't argue with it. Just learn what your boots already know. 2 paces from the iron hydrant to the cedar. 3 to the frost crack. 1 to the U that likes to catch sleeves. And because this place runs on rules the way lungs run on air. Here's the first you'll keep if you want everything you walked in with to follow you back out. Only trim the U's after the wolves stop singing. You'll be tempted to get a head clip. Sweep. Feel productive before midnight because your list is long and the dark crawls under it like an extra chore. But the packs housed in Mausoleum 9 don't tolerate the sly snap of fresh shoe or the glint of bare blades. It gets into their nerves like hail. Mr. Rendlefur, the color of fireplace ash. Old limp from a hunt in 59 he never describes. A bent fork tucked in his boot like a superstition keeps their temper in a bowl, mostly, but he hates. Fresh resin, the way you hate a fork scraping a plate. If he finds you working early, he won't roar or posture. He'll step out of the fog as if the fog owed him rent and tip your shears into the grass with that blunt fork, and you'll feel your heartbeat try to apologize for existing. Timing is respect here. Let this singing ride itself out. It twines through the cypress at 1, thins to a hum at 1:40. And by 2, the path lights stop buzzing, which is your sign. Wrap the shears with cloth so metal doesn't flash. Then oil them with the green bottle from the pantry rosemary and linseed. 3 drops per hinge because green oil calms the U. And because the blue oil is for iron gates and will scratch living wood and scratch at witch tempers besides. Work from the shadow side of each shrub, long, clean bites. No chatter. Stack clippings in burlap, tie with red twine. Red tells the compost heap not to turn the twigs into little crowns. We made that mistake once, and the town's dogs had opinions. For a week. Never, and I mean never, carry polished metal past Mausoleum 9 before 2. Even a clean spade can feel like an insult. If Rendell or his young drift your way while you're trimming, don't fill the air with words. Set a maple bacon cruller on the Coleman Angel's stone. Step back and look at your boots. If we keep a box in the cottage icebox labeled emergency. Rendell Maggs writes the label in her church hand so nobody accidentally eats them. The crullers are a piece we buy for pocket change compared to the price of stitches. If you want a story to prove the rule isn't just theater. Second month I was here, eager and stupid. I wrapped the shears but started at 1:30 just to get the corners. And resin must have traveled because Rendell arrived without a sound, knocked the tools from my hands and stared at me so. Flat and long my knees remembered prayers I'd never been taught. I backed away, set the cruller, left the path like it was his and always had been, and Mags taped my ribs after because a stare can bruise if you let fear make you rigid. "Not brave," she said, pouring tea that sang a little as it left the pot. "Exact. So here's the exactness. Wait until 2. Trim from shadow, never let metal flash. Green oil, not blue, burlap, and red twine. Don't hum while you work because humming carries in stone in ways it doesn't in air. Finish before 3 because the bell likes to practice a 13th chime at 3:01. And you don't want to be holding anything sharp when the ground decides to inhale. The EU's tug at your sleeve. Don't yank cask with your hands. Living things do better when you treat them like they're listening, and here they are. If a young wolf forgets himself and leans out of the mausoleum shadow to watch you, keep your shoulders soft and your gaze on the burlap. Curiosity is contagious, and there's ways more. We do this every few nights because the yews grow in directions the dead prefer not to walk into, and because clipped and quiet borders keep bigger hungers from testing the fence. You'll learn the sound of a clean cut versus a restless one. You'll learn the smell of sap that's grateful. When you stack the last bundle and your hands are sticky with green, you'll keep smelling until dawn. You'll understand why I call this rule plumbing. Keep the flow right and everything downstream behaves. And if the night throws you a problem, while you're working the bell counts wrong, a cough rattles the chapel vents. The red paint at the far hill seems to darken in its sleep stop. Breathe, finish the cut you've started, set the shears in cloth, and leave the warp. Use mid-sentence. Living long here is mostly knowing when to set a task down without making a fuss. I told you last night you'd hear the cemetery breathe if you listened. But what I didn't tell you is that sometimes it wheezes, and when it does, the whole chapel seems to lean in to hear itself. The sound comes up through the ossuary vents, like gravel shaken in a paper bag wet. Strutted. Rhythm struggling to be rhythmed. The first time it reached me, I thought the boiler was dying or the walls were about to molt. But Mags looked over her spectacles and slid me a crumpled sleeve of cough drops with a priest's seriousness and said, "For Gavril." And I learned the second rule that feels like a prank until you see the consequences. When the chapel coughs, you kneel. At the grate by the supply closet, you rattle 2 lozenges through the slats. You don't peer, and you speak gently to the air that answers back. Gavril used to be a vampire, or the costume of 1 velvet collars and vowels slick with candlelight. A gentleman of long dust and longer habits, but he fed wrong or swore wrong or loved wrong, the stories won't agree. And something halfway changed him and left him on the wrong landing between forms. Bones kinked into a crawl that pride won't let you watch. He lives in the bone spaces because he can't bear the pity of the aisles, and dust scribbles its signature in his lungs every hour. You'll find the grate by feel the first weeks. 3 paces from the sacristy door. 1.5 from the drip in the west corner. Knee on the tile that's always colder than it should be, even in July. You shake the packet upward so the lozenges clatter against iron like coins being offered to a wishing well. And a hand you will never describe properly pale as old paper, wrist thin as twine. Fast as a stage, trick slides out, snatches the medicine and is gone as if embarrassed by its own hunger. Don't flinch and don't stare. He hates being witnessed, like some people hate their photograph taken, and shame rots faster than meat down there. I always give him the original kind, the ones that taste like earnest medicine and funeral shoes. Mint is too bright, honey too. Domestic cherry, unforgivably young. The first time I said hello through the grate, I kept my voice just above a whisper because loud words bruise in stone. There was a pause, then a thread of a voice that had once been able to pour itself over. "Rooms, do you have the one that remembers salt?" He asked like a man afraid of asking for too much. "The kind that hums. I have the kind that works." I said because I've learned utility is a kindness here. And the paper crackled and he made a sound halfway between thanks and a sigh, and the vents quieted enough that the bell could hear itself again. Ignore him and the cough blooms. bouncing along the hollow clavicles and the stacks of femurs bundled like sticks, rattling into the belladonna beds until the witches at the west wall open their windows and look at you with a kind of patience. A cat has 4 glass. Wake them, and you'll be offered tea that smells like a day you can't have back. And if you've forgotten Rule 3 by then, you'll lose something you didn't know you still needed. The cough is a pressure, not just a noise. It makes the chapel timbers sing at a pitch that pulls on the wolves' nerves and sets the ewes to worrying their roots. And once, on a night I thought I could finish a rake's worth of leaves before, kneeling, the vents dragged the 13th chime out of euphonia like a secret. And I had to face the gate and count backward from 7 in the not name the bell taught me because doors were listening for the wrong answer. So keep a packet always in your left pocket left, because pockets teach fingers where to go when your head is full of other alarms, and replace it as soon as you hear paper that's too light. We store extra sleeves in the tin-marked ledger to discourage thieves with sweet teeth. If you catch Romanian or Hungarian drifting up with the wet rattle, nod like you understood, even if your language can't carry what his carries. Meaning is a bridge that doesn't care if you know the carpentry. If he asks for poetry, he will. On nights when fog remembers how to kneel, read him the shortest thing you can say. Honestly, a weather report, a grocery list, a memory of your mother's hands shelling peas. He'll answer with lines that are older than the chapel and younger than your fear. And the sound of the bones will settle into a tidy hush like a cupboard shutting. Remember this too. Never drop the lozenges. You offer them and you let his hand do the taking. If you fumble and they fall to the floor, leave them. Dust doesn't forgive clumsy charity. And when the coughing stops and the grate has gone back to pretending it is just iron, touch the tile with 2 fingers and say thanks to whatever composite of pride and need is listening. Gratitude is plumbing here as much as rules are. And the air carries it along the tunnels too, where it can do the work you can't reach. The west wall announces itself before you see it. The air gets cinnamon warm with a bitter seam under it, and the gravel hushes like it's remembering to be polite. And then the tiles begin, dull green, set a hair off from square, like someone with a crooked smile laid them to make sure you notice the witch's work, the place where wood used to burn under prayers, and now moss keeps the boards honest. If a door by that wall is open, keep walking. If a curtain breathes without wind, keep walking. And if a hand, young, old, or both at once, scans a chipped cup with steam curling out of it like handwriting you almost recognize, smile with your mouth and say, "Not tonight, Auntie," and keep walking. That's the rule that kept me my teeth. They always offer me tea. Some nights it smells like ginger snaps at my mother's table. Some nights like the inside of a book left in sun. Some nights like a day I swore I'd forgotten, but the price doesn't come printed on the saucer. Mags can drink it. Call her old bone friend, and her tea never bites. And she keeps their gifts lined on a shelf in the cottage bread that sings a single low note when you slice it. Jars of blue gnats that glow like stubborn thoughts, but I'm not Mags, and neither are you. You don't breathe too deep there. If your head shifts half an inch to the left and your pockets forget what's inside them, if you're caught, use the lines we keep for safety. Fasting tonight, or copper makes my heart count wrong after midnight. Or a doctor says root doesn't agree with me. No doctor has said any such thing. Here we practice the medicine of refusal. Never let your eyes rest on the teas. Surface mirrors are a sport with them, and they play to win. Okay. And never accept a sugar cube that looks like a thumbnail. We had a temp, sweet kid called Eli, who took one out of politeness. He woke up, missing the word for Thursday, and had a new freckle that moved when you weren't watching. Another aide, prettier than she knew, drank a cup that smelled like first kisses. Her hair came out in soft pairings for a week, and every pillows she touched kept her dreams like they were tips. The witches don't do it to be cruel. They do it because curiosity is an appetite. And offering hospitality is one of the old ways to measure a person: what they accept, what they refuse, how they refuse it. If they call you dear, nod. If they beckon, step 2 paces wider than feels natural, 'cause their thresholds bleed farther than their door frames. And once your foot is on their tile, you're in their etiquette, not ours. They nap in pieces and hum in languages that rub the grain of your thoughts the wrong way. They keep the belladonna so the grounds don't grow too brave. I like them from a distance, the way I like storms from a porch. Once this is the closest I've come. My was carrying the burlap from the EOC at 2:30 when a kettle hissed behind me and a voice said, "You look like you need warming." And what she held smelled exactly like the inside of my father's car on winter mornings, cracked leather, coffee, a smear of toothpaste on his thumb where he'd missed. I almost cried from the precision of it. I said, "Fasting, Auntie," and she smiled like a candle, taking the hint, and asked, "And if I promised it would only cost what you've already lost?" There are tricks in that sentence you won't catch until you're paying for them. I bowed my head and said, "I have nothing spare," and kept walking until the cinnamon fell behind my shoulders and the gravel remembered how to be rude. When you must pass there, keep one hand on the stone of the wall. Cold is a better guide. Then, sweet and, if the tiles feel warm through your boots, you turn too close. Angle toward the chapel until ordinary air finds you again. And if you ever think you can manage one sip because you're tired or lonely or the night has you by the wrists, find a quiet stone, sit on your hands until the feeling passes, and suck a cough drop meant for Gavril. The taste is a hard reminder of what we actually do here. We keep old hungers occupied so bigger ones stay asleep. And we do it with small, exact refusals that look like rudeness to people who haven't learned what kindness costs. I tell everyone the same thing before we get anywhere near the South Slope. If the Coleman Mausoleum glows, you take the long way around because a table is out and the old players are dealing. And that means the air inside has a weight for which your bones are the only currency. The door never swings. It breathes the tiniest draft of cemetery cool coming out. Candle warm going in, and under that breath you'll hear the shuffle. Not the crisp clap of casino decks, but a slow, heavy rasp, as if the cards remember when they were bark and would rather be tree again. That sound will snag you right behind the ear and turn your head without permission. And then someone will say, "One hand, just sit a moment," and before your mouth remembers, know your feet remember. Yes, don't speak to them. Don't look for them. You'll glimpse grin first wolf, mostly. That missing ear like a torn page, gloves with the fingers cut away so he can feel the pips. He keeps a silver tooth in his pocket that he won off a friend and likes to worry it when luck is tight. Then Bella, who traveled too far from water and never found a way back. She carries her own chair lined with soaked towels and her own deck sealed in a tin because she only trusts rules she's salt-pickled herself. Cobb will drip coin and river smell, though he hasn't seen a shoreline in decades, and he'll toss currencies that never made it into textbooks as if they were pennies. Mary hums, and her humming isn't a tune so much as the sound of earth deciding how deep to take you. She doesn't speak unless she's betting, and when she does, every candle decides to listen. Here's the rule carved in my ribs. Do not interrupt, do not observe, and do not, under any shine of heaven, sit in. They don't want your money. They don't want your watch or your phone or your promises about better selves. They want what proves you're here, what's still attached. K. Moeller? If the stakes are small, the first joint of a thumb, if they're feeling friendly, a sliver of rib, if the pot is old and complicated, and you don't understand the math until winter. We had a kid once, Donnie, fresh out of town with shoulders full of yes. They called to him like uncles at a barbecue, and he sat and bet a wisdom tooth. And won a silver comb with owl feathers in the spine that looked like something a normal world would call pretty. By Friday, his jaw ached like weather, and by Sunday, he'd pulled 2 more teeth on his own because he said the first one was lonely. He quit before the thaw. You hear your name from that door, remember it isn't your name anymore the moment their mouths use it. If you must pass close, sometimes fog rearranges duty press, your palm to the stone and knock twice without looking in. A courtesy older than poker. Then step back 3 paces and sweep some other path. Leave nothing on the threshold, not even respect, because respect can look like an auntie. And if you're ever carrying polished metal when the glow starts lottles, spoons, the clean edge of shears, wrap it in cloth so it doesn't flash. Shining things make them nostalgic for bargains done under moon, and nostalgia is the most expensive mood in this yard. You ask me if they cheat, I tell you they don't need to. They've been making deals since before paper learned to hold. Ink and the house here isn't the stone, it's the hunger that sits across from you smiling, patient as weather. Don't be brave. Be gone. You'll know the place before you see the paint. Because the path to plot 32 is always one step longer than it was the night before, and your calves ache with a memory you don't own. Still, I'll take you as close as anyone's allowed, which is to the bend where the cedar leans like a listener, and the ground starts to breathe in a way that isn't wind. The door is set into the hill as if a house changed its mind and decided to be earth again red, but not the fresh red of barn boards or lipstick. It's a drowned nail red, rust showing through like old blood that's learned patience. Number is stamped on a cheap metal plate, bolted on crooked 32, and the bolts themselves look ashamed. We don't sweep here. We don't plant. We don't straighten the pebbles that always roll downhill and stop in a tidy crescent in front of the threshold like teeth. Tuesdays, the cook takes a tin out flat, dented, no lid lays raw meat on it, and sets it on the grass just left of the door without knocking. Then he walks away with his chin tucked like he owes the night an apology. No one watches. No one counts how many Tuesdays it's been. That's not cowardice. That's plumbing. And the first rule of the red door is also the last. You do not approach. And if you have to pass the bend, you walk like you're already somewhere else. People in town, when they let the drink talk, call what's behind that door the boogeyman. Not a boogeyman, a definite article, capital B, the shape you. Thought your coat was when you were 7 and the hall light was off a minute too long? Monsters here don't talk much about children, even wolves and witches. Carry a kind of order that leaves the small ones alone, not from mercy so much as from a design older than any chapel. The boogeyman never learned that order. He took them. Not to teach, not for revenge, not for a bargain with rules, just because. The taking was his appetite. That's why the elders go quiet when the path curves this way. That's why even Mr. Rendell keeps his fork in his boot when the fog lies low on this slope. Our trustee, the one who handles money with his left hand and debts with his right, brought this door here years before my boots learned the map. He didn't say prison, and he didn't say mercy. Just signed for extra salt and told Mags the Tuesday schedule would start immediately and indefinitely. Maybe he thought the world would be safer if the worst hunger was fed. On a calendar in a place that understands calendars. Maybe it was the price of some other peace. I've never seen the door open. I've heard the hill exhale like a sleeper turning over, and once, exactly once, a knock from inside, soft, polite, the way a child practices on a table to learn the game of it. If you hear that, you do nothing. You don't say hello. You don't say go away. And you especially don't say your name. You angle your lantern toward your boots because lanterns are mouths if you aim them wrong. And you walk back the way you came, counting the iron fence posts in your head until your mouth remembers ordinary air. If the bell rings 13 while you're at the bend, face the gate in your mind. Count backward from 7 in the not name the bell taught you, and keep walking. The 13th chime is a doorbell, and you don't answer doorbells here unless you know who is on the porch. Practicalities, because fear without instructions is just theater. Never bring polished metal to this slope. Shine is an invitation, and invitations are contracts. Tie your coat with the red twine we keep in the cottage one loop, to knots because. Red says, not for trade in a language even dirt half remembers. If children visit in daylight for a history tour, schools still do that. Heaven help them. We route them west by the belladonna beds and tell a long story about stone carving until their curiosity forgets to tug them south. At dusk, I go chalk. The smallest graves with thin crescent marks so the ground remembers our promise to protect what's still owed sunrise. And if you catch yourself thinking you're brave enough to go closer just to see, sit on the cedar root at the bend and suck a cough drop meant for Gavril. Let the taste put you back in your body. And remember what our work actually is. Not heroics, not answers, not cleansing the world, just the slow, careful maintenance of hungers and boundaries so bigger things can sleep. One last thing you won't. Believe until your boots learn it. The path here listens. You mutter jokes or whistle or try to measure how long it is in steps. It lengthens, and your knees start to ache in a way that doesn't belong to you. If you are quiet and down, light, low, eyes on the gravel, it shortens, and the bend arrives sooner than you deserve. That's the door you don't touch. Leave it unopened and the rest of the cemetery will let you keep your other doors. I save this for your second week, because if I tell you on night 1, you'll think it's superstition with pretty manners. But by now, you've heard the bell change its mind mid-chime, and you've watched fog choose a direction. So listen, we do not tidy the children's stones the way we tidy the rest. We don't sweep their leaves. We don't scrub their names until they sheen. We don't straighten the little offerings people leave because neatness is not the same as care. Here neatness can be disrespect, and the young are owed a different kind of order. You'll find their row, by the way, the path narrows as if to hold a hand. Small markers, lambs rubbed thumb smooth by weather, a pinwheel that turns when the air is asleep. Chalk animals drawn by siblings who've already grown past the urge to draw. The wind does the covering, let it. Leaves make a blanket the ground understands. When a gust bears a name to clean, you don't fetch a broom. You kneel and draw a crescent at the foot of the stone with the chalk we keep in our left pockets left. Because sorrow sits closer to that side and it remembers better. And you make the mark thin, soft as a breath, not a billboard. That crescent isn't prayer and isn't magic exactly. It's a message in a language that lives in dirt, off limits spoken politely. If you forget, the hour will slip. Phonia will ring 12 and a fraction, and you'll feel the poppers. Ground turn restless under your boots, the way a dreaming dog runs. We learned that the hard way my first autumn, when an eager volunteer cleared every leaf out of respect. And by dawn we had footprints on the chapel tiles no one owned, and a stroller that appeared against the west wall with its wheels sunk half an inch into stone. Mags made a pot of that singing bread tea and said, "Order, not mercy," like she was correcting a recipe. You'll be tempted to set the toys straighter, to rinse the marble lambs, to line coins in tidy rows. Don't coins go where fingers? Put them toys face the direction last chosen by someone small. Lambs wear weather like a permission slip. If you must intervenance in a grief cake. A broken glass jar, do it like a ghost of yourself was passing through. Slow, out of the center of your body. No scraping noises, no sighing like you're fixing a mess. We add mittens in December. When the frost arrives Mags knits them in colors that look like apples and hangs them at the church rail with a note that says, "Take." And I leave 2 tiny pairs on the southernmost stones when the wind cuts sideways. Someone always finds use for them, and I never check who. Practicalities keep 3 pieces of chalk in the cottage tin labeled TWINE. Thieves don't respect labels, but they respect boredom. Trade out nubs before they get sharp, because a sharp line is a shout, and never draw more than 1 crescent per stone. Overspeaking makes the ground defensive. If you hear giggling behind you while you work, keep your eyes on the gravel. Sound has habits here, and this row belongs to the family that comes in the morning to talk, not to the night that wants to prove it can play. If a parent arrives after dark, which happens, and asks if it's safe to sit, you say yes and fetch a stool from the vestry, and you bring them water that hasn't touched the belladonna beds. You stand far enough away that they can be alone with their alone. Once a fox lay down across 4 stones and wouldn't move until I drew crescents for the 2 I'd missed. Once, a pinwheel spun against the weather until I set a mitten on a name. You'll think you're imagining connections until a night comes when you are tired. Then course, and you pocket the chalk to make your rounds faster, and the gate hinge shrieks, even though you oiled it and the map won't sit still. Then you'll walk back, kneel, draw the thin moons, and everything will remember the rules again. The children's stones teach you the difference between cleaning and tending. Cleaning is for us, tending is for them. And here, tending keeps the bigger hungers asleep. The bell has a namuphoniant. Once you know that, you stop treating it like hardware and start treating it like whether that chose a bell-shaped body. It's older than the chapel and proud of it, and on most nights it minds the clock the way a careful ant minds a child. Neat halves and wholes, steady as breathing. But sometimes the air around it thickens, and time gets salt in it, and the bell decides to say 13, and that is not a number. It's a doorbell. And you do not answer doorbells at Hallow's edge unless you're sure you want company you can't entertain. You hear that extra strike, there's a tremor before it like a held-in cough stop where you are, even if you're ankle-deep in clippings or halfway through a latch. Don't be under an arch. Don't be holding anything sharp set shears and cloth. Lay keys flat in your palm. Turn your face toward the gate even if you can't see it. And count backward from 7 in a language your mouth doesn't use for. Cursing, if all you have is numbers, say them like you owe them an apology. Then speak the knot named the bell-taught Eutha, one we penciled on your wrist your first night. Clear enough that the gravel hears it. It's a decoy and a contract at once. An answer that satisfies the etiquette without inviting anything to wear your true syllables, like a borrowed coat. 13 draws things. Soldiers who wandered off their rows because a dream told them their watch wasn't over. Widows who forget, for 7 steps, that their leaving was already done. Dogs who lie down on yesterday. Once a tide smell with no water, hunting for a harbor it lost before maps. Your job then is simple and exact. Don't speak to what you can't name, and don't touch what isn't yours. Step sideways into the shadow of a stone taller than your hip and wait while the bell finishes its extra idea. And the moment the air thins, there's always that breath after resume the task you left. Not a different one, because continuity is how you close a door without slamming it. If you're near the ossuary when the 13th lands, slide a lozenge through the grate for Gavril. Fear makes his cough bloom. And the chapel timbers will sing at a pitch that sets the youth to fretting if you don't sweeten the air. If you're by the children's stones, check the leaves and add a thin crescent where the wind was too thorough. The young are supposed to be off limits, and the bell respects marks as much as it respects manners. If you're passing the west wall and veils begin to drift, keep your eyes on the green tiles and your hands off any cup extended, which is love and occasion, and 13 is exactly that. Not tonight, Auntie, and walk on. Some nights euphonia offers a half-chime 12 and a hush. Or 12 in a flinch hand, that's its way of warning you that something has counted wrong somewhere. I've learned to inventory myself on that sound. Teeth. Fingers. The word I woke up with. The keys I meant to carry. The path I intended. And if anything in the list feels slippery, I go to the cottage and sit until the kettle stops pretending. And make coffee that doesn't sing practicalities. Because bravado rusts faster than iron. Never whistle near the belfry. It mimics you and invites something to keep time you can't finish. Don't test the bell with your own knock on the Ropophonia remembers hands, and she's particular. Oil the hinge of the vestry door on odd-numbered days so the echo doesn't argue with her. Keep the knot name fresh in pencil under your cuff and erase it only after sunrise with bread. Not spit bread absorbs, spit provokes. Once new to the job, I forgot the knot name and spoke my own after 13. And for a week, every mirror on the grounds lagged me by a blink. That's how you learn compliance without theater. You'll be tempted when the extra strike shocks your nerves to laugh it off like thunder. Don't. The bell is plumbing here the way the rules are. It moves pressure around so bigger pipes don't burst. Treat it like you would a sleeping giant's breath. Count with it. Answer politely. and go about your work as if being ordinary were a charmand here. It happened on a night that smelled like wet pennies and cut grass. The kind of night that makes you think you're ahead simply because the fog hasn't found your ankles yet. I had wrapped the shears in cloth, oiled them with a green bottle, told myself that starting the ooze at 1:40 would be clever just clearing the corners before the wolves wound down. And that's how you know a mistake is about to introduce itself. It borrows your voice and calls itself efficiency. I'd made 3 long, quiet bites down the shadow side of the first shrub when the resin breathed a little too loud. And from the east terrace, Mr. Rendell stepped out of the fog like the fog owed him rent. He didn't growl, he never does. Just tipped my wrapped shears into the grass with the bent fork he keeps tucked in his boot. And the 2 young ones behind him froze the way dogs do when a bad decision is rehearsing itself in their spines. I let my eyes drop to my boots and did what Mags trained into bone. No explanations, no apologies, just the ritual we keep for truce. I eased a maple bacon cruller from my pocket and set it on the Coleman Angel's toe, backing away the 3 paces that say, I remember whose garden this is. Paper crinkled, steam lifted, Rendell's shoulders settled like a weather front receding. And then the air changed thin, bright, wrong. Euphonia gave 12.5. That shiver between numbers that means something has counted where it shouldn't, and downslope past the chapel. The dark over plot 32 looked a shade redder, like old paint remembering fire. I said the not name the bell taught, me not mine. Never mind clear enough for the gravel to hear. And I turned my face toward the invisible gate and counted backward from 7 in the language I only use when I need doors to mind their business. The young wolves shifted, confused by a mathematics they don't honor. And somewhere inside the chapel, the ossuary coughed. Gavril dragging wet gravel over his throat in a rhythm that makes the timbers hum and the yews fret their roots. I slid a hand into my left pocket, always left, always there, and found the crumpled sleeve, shook to lozenges toward the vent behind me without turning, and heard that quick, embarrassed snatch of a hand too pale to explain. The 13th strike landed then, a soft extra like a new tooth trying on the mouth, and the wind changed lanes. Behind me, the west wall warmed and cinnamon shouldered into the night. And a voice I like far too much when I'm tired said, "You look cold, dear." I kept my eyes on the green tiles that weren't under my feet and answered, "Fasting, Auntie, because etiquette is a kind of armor here," and the veils drifted on, disappointed like cats. Rendell finished the cruller 2 neat bites. Always tidy about a tand, tapped the angel's stone once with his fork, the way some men tip their hats, then guided his young back into the marble. I picked up the shears by the cloth, heart trying to climb out through my thumb, and told the night out loud what I intended next, so it couldn't suggest alternatives. Shadow sighed. 5 clean cuts, finished before 2, as if making a list could stitch the world back into the seam I prefer. But the path decided to test me. It shortened under my steps like it does when you behave. Then lengthened the moment I thought of plot 32 again. My calves aching with a memory that doesn't belong to me. I stopped, breathed, put the shears down, and chalked a thin crescent at the foot of the smallest stone near Meals. Had blown away from a name. And felt the ground relax the way a tight jaw does when it's told it doesn't. Have to fight anymore? The bell exhaled. There's always that breath after, and regular time came back like a sheepish clerk. I finished the U I'd started, stacked clippings in burlap, tied them with red twine so the compost wouldn't turn them into crowns, and left the rest for 205s because being exact sometimes means stopping exactly where you are. Back in the cottage, Mags didn't lecture. She poured coffee that didn't sing and said, "Not brave." With that small nod, that means she's weighing whether to add yet. And I answered, exact, because the night had already taught me it isn't the wolves or the witches or the door that will get you first, it's the voice in your own mouth that says you have time for one quick cut. Tuesday kept its own weather. That weak fog laid low like a folded blanket. Air tasting. Faintly of iron and old mint tanned, I was doing rounds by touch more than sight. Counting from iron hydrant to cedar to frost crack with the kind of confidence that makes you sloppy. When a silence fell over the south slope that didn't belong to any clock I knew. And my stomach remembered something before my head did. I hadn't heard the cook's tin clink at the bend by plot 32. Tuesdays are plumbing, not superstition. The tin goes down with its meat, the hill exhales, the night moves on. Miss that cadence and pressure bulges somewhere you can't see until it bursts where you wish it wouldn't. The rules say don't approach the red door. Not with your eyes. Not with your shadow, and certainly not with your curiosity. But the rules also say don't leave a broken pipe to flood the house because you're afraid of getting your shoes wet. I stood at the cedar that leans like a listener and tested the dark. It's the way you test a stove burner you don't quite trust hand an inch above. Feeling for a heat that isn't heat in there, it was. That subtle humming in the dirt that means hunger is awake enough to take attendance. Euphonia had been sulking all evening, ringing a polite 10 like she was saving her voice. Which meant I couldn't use her temper as a compass. I tied my coat shut with a loop of the red twine from my pocket. Tells the night not for. Trade and wrapped my lantern in burlap so the light wouldn't act like a mouth. Not brave, I told myself out loud, because words calve off foolishness. Exact. And I walked 5 slow paces toward the bend, not one more, counting. Fence posts in my head like rosary beads. The fog let me have the shape of the tin and nothing else. A flat, dented outline on grass too green for winter. A shine that wasn't a shine under the burlap like an eye behind a veil. There was no meat on it, or there was. Distance lies in fog. The way laughter lies in bars, and either answer was an invitation to invent a story I'd regret. Something inside the hill tapped the door soft, polite. Practicing the game of knocking the way a child practices scales and every hair on my arms. Stood up as if the air had become a question. I kept my gaze on my boots because lantern light, pointed wrong is a name, and names are invitations. I set the lantern down 2 paces shy of the crescent of pebbles that always collect in front of the threshold, like teeth, made sure the burlap still muzzled the flame. And spoke the knot name the bell had taught me in June, the one we keep penciled under. Cuffs and a race with bread at dawn. Then I counted backward from 7 in the language. I reserve for doors and dogs and things that understand etiquette better than reason. The ground breathed out, not open, not closed, a pressure release like a sleeper changing sides and from just beyond where my eyes were permitted to own. I heard the tin shift and a wet weight answer gravity. I didn't say good and I didn't say thank you, because both can be misunderstood as a promise to keep showing up. I reached 2 fingers into my left pocket, found the cough drops I keep for Gavril, and put one between my teeth. To remind myself what duty tastes like when it's honest, Euphonia, perhaps soothed by the decision, gave a tidy 11 that felt like approval. And the fog tugged backward an inch, the way a curtain does when the actor you didn't want steps. Off stage. I took 3 steps back the way I'd come, never turn your back here. We walk away like we're already where we're going, lifted the lantern and let its muffled glow find my boots, not the door. Behind me, metals sang a little like cooling, and the hill settled into that slow subterranean snore that means the world gets to be ordinary for another hour. On my way past the children's row, a gust had bared a name. I knelt, drew the thinnest crescent I could manage, and felt the ground relax its jaw. At the chapel, the ossuary coughed once, sharply, like a critic grudging applause. I rattled 2 lozenges through the grate without looking, and a hand snatched them with its usual embarrassed speed. By the time I reached the cottage, Mags had set the kettle to pretending. She didn't ask if I'd gone to the bend because she doesn't ask questions whose answers she isn't willing to carry. She just slid me coffee that didn't sing and a cruller wrapped in paper that had the word Rendell written on it in her church hand. "Count right?" she said, eyes on the steam. Counted by the book, I said, which is how we tell each other we broke no rules and bent one or two in the service of the rest. She nodded, the way the map nods when it decides to be honest for a page. Later, making the final rounds, I passed the bend again without trying to see, and the fog pretended not to know me. That's the lesson I write down for rookies on Tuesdays. Sometimes exactness means stepping close enough to keep the plumbing from bursting. And sometimes it means trusting a closed door to do its job. The art is knowing which Tuesday you're standing in and having the spine to let the night think it chose you. Dawn makes promises it doesn't always keep out here. But it's still the word we work toward, and on your last training night, I walk you once more from the cottage to the gate, so your boots remember the route without me talking it into place. And I say the things that sound like superstition until the night proves their plumbing. The cemetery runs on, rules the way. Bodies run on breath, and your job is to move pressure where it belongs so bigger pipes don't burst. You wait to trim the use until the wolves quit singing. You wrap the shears and oil them with the green bottle never blue, and you work from the shadow. Side with burlap ready and red twine to keep the compost from turning clippings into crowns. You keep maple bacon crullers in your pocket for Mr. Rendell because truce is cheaper than stitches. And when resin travels wrong, and he steps from fog like the fog owes him rent, you set the offering on the Coleman angel's toe and back 3 paces without trying to decorate the air with apologies. If the chapel wheezes through its bones, if you kneel at the grate by feel 3 paces from the sacristy, 1.5 from the drip end, you rattle 2 lozenges up for Gavril without peering because pride rots faster than meat and his quick pale hand hates witnesses. If he asks for the kind that remembers salt, you give him the honest medicine flavor that tastes like funeral shoes. And the timbers will stop singing at the pitch that makes the yews fret. When veils gather by the west wall and a chipped cup steams like handwriting you almost recognize, you keep your eyes off the tea. You smile with your mouth and you say, "Not tonight, Auntie." Because curiosity is an appetite and witches keep very long calendars. You pass on, counting tiles until ordinary gravel finds you. If the Coleman mausoleum glows, you take the long way. Don't interrupt, don't observe. Don't sit in those are merchants older than paper, and the only auntie they respect from humans is what's still attached. I've shown you the scar in the map where Donnie's wisdom turned lonely and recruited friends. Let that be enough. Third terrace, bend by the leaning cedar. Plot 30-tooth a door you don't touch. The breath. You don't measure. Tuesdays we keep the schedule so the world keeps its spine, but even then you never bring shine to that hill. You tie your coat with a loop of red twine that says, "Not for trade." You keep your lantern muzzled in burlap, and if you must step close enough to smell the paint, remembering fire. You speak the not name Euphonia taught you and count backward from 7 in the language meant for doors and dogs. Then walk away like you're already where you're going. Children's stones you tend not clean. Leaves or blankets, crescents, are boundaries. And a thin chalk moon at a bare name will relax the ground the way a jaw unclenches when told it doesn't have to fight. Don't straighten toys, don't rinse lambs, don't make coins into rose neatness is for us, order is for them. And the Beluphonia when she decides to say 13, you don't answer with your true syllables. You set down sharp things. Face the gate you can't see. Let the not name do the etiquette. And resume the exact task you left as soon as the air thins, because continuity closes doors without slamming them. I hand you the kit I wish someone had handed me. Ring of keys with the stubborn one marked in wax. Green oil, burlap, red twine, chalk, cough drops in the left pocket by habit, not heroics. A paper-wrapped cruller with Rendell written in Mags's. Church hand pencil lines under your cuff for the not name and a square of bread to erase it with after sunrise. We walk the perimeter while the owls hand the sky back to crows, and right on the line where night remembers it meant to linger. Euphonia gives 12 in a breath. After that feels like a choice. Somewhere the ossuary clears its throat once, and from the west wall a kettle thinks about hissing and changes its mind. That's the work, I tell you. And I don't dress it up because honesty is also plumbing. Not heroics, not answers. Not cleansing the world, just the small, careful maintenance of hungers and boundaries, so bigger things can sleep. You'll be tempted to be brave. Don't be exact. If footsteps line up behind you without a shadow to account for them, say my name. If I don't answer, say the not name. That goes nowhere. Count your way to the gate and let the hinge sing to tell the knight who owns the latch. The fog loosens like a too tight bandage. The map sits still just long enough for you to fold it. Crows start their rude commentary. I pass you the ring, and the weight of it makes your shoulders straighten in a way I recognize from my first honest morning here. You'll be fine, I say, because you will be if you remember the difference between tending and cleaning, truce and victory, brave and exact. I step through the iron and look back once because we're allowed that much softness at daybreak. And as the light makes the names on the north lawn coins again, the bell minds the hour like a careful ant, and Hollow's edge exhales the long breath it holds between nights. Welcome to the work. Keep the pressure moving. Keep the doors closed without slamming. Keep your teeth and your word. And when the world asks for bravery, give it precision. Here, that's what keeps the monsters retired and the rest of us alive.